When I crossed over, the story was already nearing its end. The male lead had defeated the villain and was living happily with the female lead. The villain, having lost his beloved, was paralyzed in bed and wished only for death. I promptly slapped him across the face several times. The company is about to go bankrupt, and thousands of employees are waiting to be fed. And here you are acting like you're dying over a woman. The villain was stunned by my blow and threatened to fire me. I grabbed his chin and gave him a cold, menacing smile. You'd better get up and start making money fast. If we can't pay the salaries, I'll strip off your pants and sell them. In the hospital, George lay on the sick bed with a pale face to keep his job. I held a pile of documents and humbly begged him to Mr. Green, these are still waiting for your decision. If you don't want to look at them, how about I read them to you? George, with a neck brace on, stared silently at the ceiling without even moving his eyes, looking like a dried-up, salted fish stranded on the beach. The more I looked, the angrier I got. 3 days ago, I had been working overtime until midnight. Just as I had fallen asleep, my boss called and gave me an earful. The wretched capitalist tore apart the proposal I had worked so hard on and threatened to dock my pay. I swallowed my anger and hung up the phone, but I couldn't fall back asleep after that. I casually picked a novel to pass the time. The plot was extremely cliché. A wealthy woman doesn't love her handsome and rich fiancé, but instead falls for a poor guy. The fiancé turns into the antagonist, constantly causing trouble for the male lead. In the end, he gets into a car accident, becomes paralyzed, his company goes bankrupt, and he starves himself to death, while the main couple lives happily ever after. The stupid plot made me even more furious. I finally managed to fall asleep, only to open my eyes and find myself transported into a book, becoming the villain's assistant, just as the book described. George was determined to starve himself to death. It's been 3 days since I arrived, and I haven't seen him eat a single bite of food. I found a doctor to prescribe him a large supply of nutritional injections and glucose. He gets injections every day, seeing that the hunger strike wasn't working. George started looking for ways to jump out of the window every day. Whenever the caregiver wasn't paying attention, he would roll off the bed and try to climb toward the window. Fortunately, he was paralyzed and could only crawl gloomily on the floor, unable to even reach the window. So, after this happened a few times, even the caregiver refused to continue. I had to keep an eye on him 24/7. But the moment I went to the restroom, I came out to see him struggling to climb onto the windowsill again. Mrs. Green was desperately holding on to his waist to stop him from jumping. The sight made my temples throb. I couldn't take it anymore. So I rushed over, pulled Mrs. Green aside, and swung my arm, slapping George twice across the face with a sharp smack. Smack. The company is on the verge of collapse, and thousands of employees are waiting to be fed. And here you are acting like you're ready to die over a woman. George covered his face and roared in disbelief. You actually dare to hit me. I'm hitting you, and that's exactly who I mean. I pinched George's chin and gave him a cold, sinister smile. You'd better get up and start earning money quickly. Otherwise, if I can't pay the wages, I'll strip your pants off and sell them. George remained stubborn and tried to wriggle away, still attempting to jump out. I was instantly filled with rage. They lifted him by his thighs and placed him on the windowsill. George, terrified, grabbed the edge of the window and shouted angrily, "What are you doing?" Mrs. Green let out a sharp cry and rushed forward. I raised my hand to stop her, staring coldly at George. Jump. If you don't jump, you're not a man. George was caught in a dilemma, humiliated and furious, and actually let go and jumped. Mrs. Green scrambled frantically down the stairs as if she had gone mad. By the time I reached the ground floor, George was lying spread-eagled on the mat, his arms still trembling slightly. The security captain next to me was speaking to Mrs. Green. Miss Lisa had us place cushions here a few days ago. Rest assured, Mr. Green will be perfectly fine. Mrs. Green came over, grabbed my hand, and cried as if her heart were breaking. Assistant Lisa, it's all thanks to you. If you can help George get through this, I'll give you $30 million. I was completely overwhelmed by the money. I agreed without hesitation. This wasn't a capitalist. This was a gold nugget. I dismissed the caregiver and stayed by his side every day, serving him tea and water and massaging his legs. The doctor said he's only temporarily paralyzed, and with active rehabilitation, there's a good chance he can stand up again. Hearing this, George's expression finally showed a slight change, but it quickly faded again. If she doesn't want me anymore, what's the use of me standing up? What's the use of saying that? It means I don't have to help you go to the toilet, and I don't have to wipe your bottom for you. George's expression finally broke. Get the caregiver for me. I don't want you to help me with these things. You crawl around on the floor all day. You've scared all the caregivers away. Then I don't want your help either. I let out a cold laugh. As long as you can hold it in. After a few bottles of glucose, George couldn't lie still anymore. Using the only 2 fingers he could move, he kept adjusting the bed, raising it one moment and lowering it the next. But no matter what, he couldn't find a comfortable position. I calmly sat on the sofa, playing with my phone, pretending not to see George's murderous glare. Another half-hour passed. Hey, I looked up. Who is Hey? George's face was full of humiliation. Assistant Lisa, I need to use the restroom. I brought the urinal out from the restroom, lifted his blanket, calmly pulled down his pants, and held his thing to insert it inside. After the sound of trickling, a barely audible gasp sounded. I looked up and saw George abruptly turn his head away, his eyes red as if he had suffered some great insult. I, the one serving him, wasn't even upset. Yet, he was the first to feel wronged. I couldn't be bothered to care what he was thinking. So, I swiftly pulled up his pants, carrying the urine bottle. I entered the bathroom. After I came out, George announced with a stiff face that from now on, we would need to cooperate with rehabilitation. Upon hearing this news, Mrs. Green immediately transferred $5 million to me, looking at the string of zeros in my account. My last trace of resentment vanished. I immediately ordered an exquisite lunch for George, having gone too long without a proper meal. George devoured his food ravenously. After the meal, I brought over all the documents that had piled up over the past few days and placed them with a thud in front of him. Get to work. After finishing the accumulated documents, the next step is rehabilitation. The Green family hired a strong medical team. My daily task is to watch over George, and after his rehabilitation is done, bring him the work that needs to be handled. Perhaps the desire to use the bathroom independently was too strong. George was very cooperative with the doctor's arrangements. No matter how many times he fell, he never intended to give up. This made me see him in a new light. After a month of active rehabilitation, George's previously numb lower body finally showed a slight change. After wiping his face in the morning, I went to the bathroom to get the urinal, ready to help him urinate. Unexpectedly, George used his cast-covered arm to press down firmly on the blanket, refusing to let me lift it no matter what. I looked at the blush spreading behind his ears, unable to believe it. You're not getting shy about it now, are you? Seeing that the rehabilitation time was almost up, I didn't have time to worry about his little thoughts, so I just pulled the blanket off directly. Before I could get a clear look, George quickly covered a certain part with his hand and said angrily, "You go out first." I stared blankly at the place he was covering with his hand. George is paralyzed from the waist down, so I looked at him with eyes full of surprise. The moment he looked up, he met George's utterly mortified gaze. Just then, the team of experts on rounds arrived. George quickly shrank further under the covers. The lead doctor spoke in a gentle tone. Are you feeling any better today? Do you have any sensation below the waist? George paused for a moment and said that, no. What do you mean, no? I grew anxious, walked over, pulled back the blanket, and pointed to a certain area, saying happily, look at this. The medical staff gathered around with surprised expressions to take a look. After a heated discussion, the experts finally reached a conclusion. Significant progress has been made in the rehabilitation process. Mr. Green will soon be able to stand up. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone excitedly gathered around George, applauding him and giving him thumbs up. Mr. Green's incredible perseverance is truly admirable. You are the first to recover this quickly. which is highly significant for reference. George said expressionlessly, "Thank you for the compliment. We will now go and study the follow-up treatment plan, striving to help you stand up as soon as possible." The doctors went out to the meeting, beaming with joy. I happily escorted the doctors out, closed the door, and turned around to meet George's sharp, knife-like gaze. "Lisa," George growled in a low voice, "did you do that on purpose?" I'm baffled. "What are you talking about? Why did you lift the blanket? You knew perfectly well. You did it on purpose to embarrass me." Honestly, telling the doctor about the changes in your body is not called embarrassment. I threw the morning newspaper in front of him. "Take a look. This is what's called embarrassment." The newspaper used an entire page to report on the wedding of the Smith family's daughter, lavishing praise on their love that transcended social classes. At the end of the article, it was written that George was infatuated with Josephine, drove recklessly for love, was severely injured and hospitalized, and even included a photo of George lying on a stretcher covered in blood in the corner. The stark contrast between the two photos made me feel sorry for him. This time, George was severely traumatized, and he began to exercise more actively. 2 months later, he was actually able to walk with a cane. Mrs. Green didn't hesitate to transfer another $10 million to me, holding my hand with tears of excitement in her eyes. "George owes his success today entirely to you. You are the great benefactor of our family." "Not at all. It was your profound love for your son that moved heaven and earth." Allowing Mr. Green to stand up again, we exchanged compliments, and the atmosphere was very harmonious. After Mrs. Green left, George sneered, "It must be the power of money that moves heaven and earth." Happily holding my phone, I looked at the balance in my bank account and decided not to argue with a petty man. George truly lived up to his role as the domineering antagonist in the book with exceptional work abilities. After being discharged from the hospital, he quickly secured several major contracts. The client was moved to tears by the resilient and determined CEO Green and immediately expressed a desire for long-term cooperation. Seeing their boss still working hard on crutches, the employees became even more diligent, and for a time, the entire company was united in purpose. In just half a year, the company's performance multiplied several times over, and George's leg had completely returned to normal. For this reason, the company booked an entire banquet hall to hold the celebration. After work, I accompanied George to the mall owned by the Green family to pick out clothes for the banquet. As soon as we entered the store, we saw Josephine. This was the female lead from the book, George's former fiancée. At this moment, the shop assistant was looking at her with a troubled expression. "Miss Smith, your card has been frozen and can't be processed. Perhaps you could come back another time to pick up these clothes." "Can't I just sign for it then?" "I'm very sorry, but no." "Why can't I? I've always been able to sign for it before." "The reason you were able to sign for it before was because Mr. Green instructed us to do so. He always settled the bill afterward," the clerk said politely, looking at her. "But now it doesn't seem appropriate anymore." Josephine's face instantly flushed bright red. The clerk seized the opportunity to add fuel to the fire. "How about having your husband come and pay for it?" Who doesn't know that Josephine broke off her engagement with her fiancé and severed ties with her family to be with her lover, only to have her parents cut off her financial support in the end? George couldn't bear to listen any longer. "I'll pay for her." Josephine turned around at the sound. Josephine looked like a wrong child finally seeing a parent, her little face scrunching up as tears instantly welled in her eyes. George's previously indifferent expression immediately crumbled. "Don't cry. Tell me what's wrong." He was so flustered that he didn't know what to do, quickly lifting his sleeve to carefully wipe away Josephine's tears. I was completely stunned. This must be what they call the ultimate S, looking at his pathetic state. I couldn't help but want to kick him twice. Josephine's eyes were filled with tears, yet she managed to show a sweet smile. "I'm so glad to see you're okay. Come on, sis." I walked up to Josephine. "If you were so worried, where were you when he was in the hospital?" Josephine frowned, and tears immediately began to roll down her cheeks. George shot me a fierce glare before turning to comfort Josephine. I know it was him who didn't allow you to come see me. I don't blame you. Josephine smiled through her tears. Really, really. The two of them poured out their hearts to each other as if no one else was around. Josephine lifted her delicate face with lips red and teeth white, looking especially pitiful and endearing. My dad froze my card. But you know I can't wear those cheap clothes. George was completely enchanted and handed her a card. Here, take this. Spend as much as you want. I stood quietly by, watching him show off. Josephine unapologetically selected dozens of outfits and bags, nearly clearing out the entire store. When it was time to check out, she arrogantly handed over her card. The shop assistant, with a forced smile, swiped the card through the card reader, swiped it again. The shop assistant frowned and swiped the card again. Finally, her face completely fell. This card doesn't seem to work. George took it back with a puzzled look, then pulled out another card and handed it over. Swipe this one. 1 minute later, Boss Green. This one doesn't work either. George refused to believe it and tried swiping every single card he had. Surprisingly, none of them worked. Josephine was stunned. George, are you having financial problems? George's face turned bright red, and he angrily turned to ask me what's going on. I innocently spread my hands. You've spent all your money on medical treatment. I'm just treating my leg. How could it cost tens of millions? The leg didn't cost that much. It was the treatment for your other illness that used up the money. George was startled. He pulled me aside, his voice filled with anxiety. Do I have any other illnesses? I was even more surprised than he was. Severe love addiction and advanced stage of SING. Such a serious condition, and you didn't know about it yourself. George first breathed a sigh of relief, then took a few deep breaths, trying to speak as calmly as possible. So that means all that money went into your pocket. Right, I nodded. Exactly. That was my mother's promise to you. Why take the money from my card? Mrs. Green said that when you broke ties with your family for Miss Smith, you vowed not to spend a single penny from them. Therefore, she couldn't compromise your principles. George's fingers tightly gripped those few cards, his face alternating between green and red. I watched his expression, laughing hysterically inside. Last night, Mrs. Green transferred another $5 million to me. And now, George only has a few thousand left in his card. Haha, let's see how he can keep showing off now. I was feeling happy when George suddenly looked at me thoughtfully. Then his eyes lit up. Assistant Lisa, lend me some money first, and I'll pay you back later. I was so angry I almost laughed. So I decided to ask for an exorbitant amount. I can lend it to you, but you have to pay me back double. Green Court's furious roar. Are you crazy or am I crazy? At that moment, Josephine leaned in, her face clearly showing anxiety and urgency. George, are you ready? George instantly lost his head, gritting his teeth. Deal, because there were too many items purchased. After paying, the clerk said they would arrange for home delivery. Josephine nodded with satisfaction and asked George if he could take her home. How could George, the ultimate simp, refuse? He immediately agreed, generously, saying it was no problem. No sooner had she reached the door than a pink electric scooter pulled up in front of her. The man on the scooter lifted his helmet, revealing a young and handsome face. Honey. Josephine rushed into the man's arms like a happy little bird, completely forgetting about the sucker who had just paid for her behind her. The two happily discussed what to eat for dinner as the electric scooter slowly merged into the traffic, leaving George alone in the wind, utterly bewildered, until the two were completely out of sight. George still stood there foolishly, motionless. Haha. I pointed at George and laughed. A.S. Sing till the end and ending up with nothing. George was deeply hurt. On the way back, he sat in the back seat without saying a word. I drove the car and sang along to the music on the radio. Today is a good day. Everything I wish for can come true. Today is a good day. George's face in the rear view mirror grew darker and darker. Lisa, do you think I don't have the guts to fire you? I let out a fearless hum. Have you forgotten how much money you owe me? Josephine spent a total of $2 million on clothes and bags. plus George's promise to pay back double. He was instantly in debt for $4 million. That statement was too devastating. George didn't say another word the entire way. Perhaps because he was burdened with debt, George worked even harder. He left early and returned late every day, dragging the entire company along to work overtime. I seriously suspect he's taking revenge on me in this way. Damn capitalist. Fortunately, our efforts paid off through the relentless hard work of the entire company. We signed a multi-billion-dollar contract with a certain enterprise. If this collaboration proceeds smoothly, the company's IPO will be just around the corner. I was immersed in the joy of soon becoming one of the company's original shareholders, counting down the days until the signing every day. But when that day arrived, George took a phone call and vanished without a trace. The signing was just around the corner. I was so anxious that I paced around the conference room and even developed a large blister on my tongue. But he never returned. Even as the sun set, the collaboration, as expected, fell through. At 7:00 in the evening, a heavy rain began to fall from the sky. George finally got in touch and shared an address with me, asking me to pick him up. I'm not going. With the thunder and lightning outside, he might as well just die out there. Seeing that I hadn't replied to the message, George directly called me. Without hesitation, I turned off my phone and went back to sleep. 5 minutes later, I sprang out of bed, grabbed my keys, and ran outside. I almost forgot that he still owes me money if he dies. Who am I supposed to go to for it? The power of money got me there in half an hour. The entire street was completely empty. Only George stood there in the rain, looking utterly dejected. He walked with his face tilted upward as if acting in a TV drama, letting the rain pour down on his face. Suddenly, a car honked and darted out from one side. But George, as if he hadn't heard it, kept walking straight ahead. I threw away the cumbersome umbrella, sprinted like a 100-meter dash, and kicked George into the flower bed by the roadside. The car blared its horn angrily, roaring past us and splashing rain water from the ground. I quickly grabbed George and used him as a shield. George clutched his waist and wiped the dirty water off his face. A roar of helplessness. Lisa, how dare you kick me? I spat out the rainwater in my mouth with a tie, grabbed his hair, and slapped him twice more, left and right. Smack, smack. Not only do I dare to kick, I also dare to hit. I shook my numb, stinging hand, picked up the umbrella from the ground, and without another word started hitting him with it. Why didn't you answer my calls? I'm working overtime to earn money for you. What are you doing? I was counting on the company going public, but with your attitude, it's a miracle if we don't get delisted. George had nowhere to hide from the beating, so he just stood there stiffly and took it. Seeing him like that made me even angrier. I leaped up and kicked him right into a puddle on the road. George was completely enraged. He got up from the ground and roared at me. Are you crazy? I think you're the crazy one, rushing to be someone else's male mistress. George was so angry that smoke was coming out of his head. Who are you calling a homewrecker? I looked at him and said word by word, I'm talking about you, Green Tingon, you male homewrecker. Even though they're married, you're still rushing to lick their boots. If you're not a homewrecker, then what are you? Josephine had a fight with her husband, and she called me very upset. How could I just ignore that? So, you just completely forgot about your work. Is that it? No. George started to make excuses. It was still early at the time. I originally thought I'd just comfort her and then go back. But who knew Josephine would get so angry and run out, taking my car and running away from home? I was dumbfounded. So what? The phone was in the car at the time. Are you an idiot? Couldn't you just take a taxi back to the office? When it came to this, George looked furious. Her husband chased after me and lunged at me as soon as he saw me. Should I have just let him hit me? I rubbed my temples. And then what? George hung his head in shame. Someone called the police. Then, how did you get out? He called Josephine, George said through gritted teeth. Josephine cried, and then we shook hands and made up. Where are the two of them now? George looked towards a window that was still lit up. The warm yellow light reflected the silhouettes of two people being affectionate with each other. I was speechless. I'm too exhausted to even comment on how absurd this plot is. I silently held up the umbrella and started walking back, with George quickly catching up. Because I was in such a hurry, I had parked the car haphazardly by the roadside. There was a piece of paper tucked under the windshield wiper. I walked over and picked it up to take a look. Perfect. It was a parking ticket. It's raining so heavily, and the traffic police are still out working so diligently. My stupid boss, in order to suck up to someone, stood up the client. I can't help but want to go crazy. Ah, George jumped in fright. What are you doing? I suddenly remembered something. Dad, where's your own car? George coughed awkwardly. It was wrecked by Josephine. After saying that, he regained his righteous indignation. Why else would I ask you to pick me up? Get out of here. Of course. George refused to leave. The moment I unlocked the car, he pulled the door open and got in. On the way, no matter how much I cursed, George remained silent. When I finally got tired of talking, I glanced in the rear view mirror. That glance almost made me spit blood in anger. George actually fell asleep after arriving. I slammed on the brakes abruptly, and George's head hit the front seat. He held his head. What are you doing? I got out of the car and threw him a towel. Dry off. George took it with satisfaction, wiping his face first, and then his head. After he finished drying off, I pointed at the water stain he had dragged onto the seat and said, "That's a rag for you to wipe that area." Then, why didn't you say so earlier? George's face instantly turned ashen, and he pointed at my car, shouting in frustration, "This piece of junk still needs wiping." I said coldly, "If it weren't for this piece of junk, you'd still be outside getting drenched like a dog." George stopped talking and immediately followed me through the alleyways. I stopped in front of a low-rise house, took out my keys, and opened the door. What are we doing here? This is my home. George stood wearily at the door, refusing to come in. Why did you bring me here? I turned back and sneered. You didn't think I would take a detour to drop you off at home first and then come back, did you? Shouldn't that be the case? George lifted his chin, putting on an air of dignified elegance. Unfortunately, he was covered in mud from head to toe, with even his hair clumped into strands. He looked just like a drowned dog, yet he seemed completely unaware of anything wrong, still wearing that haughty expression. Don't forget, I'm your boss. Maybe you should look in the mirror before you speak. I took down the large red mirror I bought from the $2 store from the wall and threw it into his arms. George picked it up with disgust and held it up in front of his face. After a full minute of silence, his shoulders slumped and he stopped holding himself tense. George slowly moved the mirror away and coughed. Then I'm your boss, too. Not anymore. What? George grew anxious. What do you mean? It means I quit. George was completely flustered now, and he couldn't even pretend to be reserved anymore. He walked in and followed behind me, chattering incessantly. The 30 million my mom promised. There's still 10 million left. Right. Don't you want it anymore? And besides, I still owe you money. The remaining 10 million can only be obtained after curing your love's sick brain. I admit I don't have the ability for that. You're already beyond help. Apart from being reborn, there's no other cure. I sat on the only stool in the room, looking up at George. Handsome, wealthy, and from a good family. Any one of these traits would be a winning hand. Yet, he possessed them all. Yet, he is such a lovesick fool, completely manipulated by a woman, almost losing his life in the process. I really can't understand it. What exactly do you like about her? George didn't expect me to ask this. He frowned and thought for a long time. I don't know either. He looked even more confused than I was. I clearly remember hating her when I was a kid. She cried all the time and was always lying. He seemed to snap back to reality. Right. Why do I like her? Logically speaking. He paused and glanced at me a little sheepishly. You're more my type after all. I was so startled I jumped up. You better not. What do you mean? George's face darkened. Am I that embarrassing to be seen with my lips twitched? You're perfectly presentable. George nodded in satisfaction. That's more like it. But you're hard to shake off. Always threatening to die or live. Who can handle that? George was so upset by what I said that he squatted in the corner without making a sound. Suddenly, a possibility occurred to me. Could it be that he's influenced by the settings in the book? George's face darkened as he remained silent for a long moment. then suddenly sprang up from the ground. Could it be that someone has put a curse on me? The corner of my mouth twitched. He thought to himself, "It's not a curse. You're being manipulated by the author." In the end, George repeatedly promised not to be influenced by Josephine again, almost swearing an oath to the heavens. I looked at him with half belief. I asked this a final rally before the end. George firmly stated that I really won't have any more involvement with her. Then I'm going to resign. 2. Why didn't I make a promise? I joined this company because I was drawn to its potential for growth. But look at the state it's in now. I let out a deep sigh. I'm really disappointed in you. George hung his head in shame, but he quickly pulled himself together. Before you came, I had already called the client to explain, and they said they're willing to give us another chance. He said with great conviction, no matter the outcome, I promise the bonuses I committed to you will be honored. It was like finding a village beyond the mountains and streams. I suppressed the wild joy in my heart and put on a troubled expression. Money isn't the issue. What's important is that your current state makes me feel the company has no future. How could it have no future? George began recounting his inspiring journey after graduation, how he had not relied on the slightest bit of family resources and had worked hard to start his own company. He also promised that he would regain his former drive and ensure the company goes public within 3 years, and said he would repay the money he owed me as soon as possible. Only then did I reluctantly agree not to resign. Finally, I tossed the car keys to him. Drive back by yourself. George remained motionless, a faint, suspicious blush appearing on his face. I looked over in confusion. George, I can't drive a manual transmission car. I was speechless. In the end, George didn't leave either. I was just about to see him off. But as soon as I stepped outside, a thunderbolt struck. George, that coward, refused to go out no matter what. I thought for a moment, pointed to the small sofa in the living room, and said to George, "Then this will be your bed for tonight. Get it ready yourself." After saying that, I grabbed my clothes and went to wash up. When I came out, George was still standing there motionless. When he saw me, he immediately averted his eyes. I don't know why, but I checked my clothes from top to bottom. Long sleeves and long pants, all wrapped up tightly. Are you crazy? George still didn't dare to look at me. He turned his head toward me, but his gaze fell on the wall behind me. Hey, lend me a change of clothes. I couldn't be bothered to guess what he was thinking. So, I rummaged through the closet and tossed him my dad's old clothes. George held up the thin, worn-out t-shirt and shorts, his brows furrowed so tightly they could crush a fly. Who wore these before? My dad. Oh, his brows relaxed, a strange smile playing on his face. So, would your uncle mind if I wore his clothes? I took a step to the side, revealing the black and white photo of my dad behind me. Here he is. You can ask him yourself. George ended up wearing that outfit, after all. He somehow found a box of instant noodles and placed it in front of my dad, then clasped his hands together and bowed. He was muttering something under his breath, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. Only after doing all this did he pick up the set of clothes and head into the bathroom. By the time he came out, I was already eating the instant noodles. George walked over and took a look, his face instantly darkening. You ate the offerings I gave to my uncle. I slurped a big mouthful without changing my expression, casually responding to him that what's my dad's is mine. George was left speechless and sat alone sulking. I asked him, "Why aren't you going to sleep? What are you doing sitting here? You're sitting on my bed. How am I supposed to sleep?" I was speechless. Just a moment. I'll be finished eating soon. I'll finish the remaining half bowl of noodles quickly, I said, picking up the instant noodle bowl. Gurgle. The sound echoed in the quiet room. My hands holding the bowl froze as I turned to look at George's stomach. George's face instantly flushed red, with his neck and ears also turning crimson, even though he was wearing my dad's old t-shirt. His face was truly a feast for the eyes. I suddenly felt even hungrier. He immediately wolfed down the remaining instant noodles in a few quick bites. Then he stood up and wiped his mouth. All right, I'm done eating. You can go to sleep now. George indeed kept his word. He swiftly resumed, pushing the cooperation forward, and to show sincerity, took me flying from city to city. chasing after the partners. For a whole month, he accompanied them in everything: drinking, playing ball, swimming, and working out. Freed from the constraints of the books, he began to reveal a side of himself that was calm and restrained. No matter what request the other party made, he would agree without changing his expression. At the dinner table, the business partner tried to pressure me into drinking, and for the first time, George showed a displeased expression. He reached out to block the hand of the person holding the wine bottle, his voice carrying a chill. "I'm the one who messed up the collaboration. Since it's an apology, it should naturally be on me." The man's tone was unfriendly. "Are you sure you can still drink?" George's face was flushed, but he replied firmly, "I can do it." That night, George got completely drunk. I barely managed to get him back to the hotel, and it nearly exhausted me. Just as I was about to return to my room, George grabbed my hand. His face was flushed from the alcohol, and even his voice carried a hint of drunkenness. "Why don't you like me?" My vision went black instantly. Is he having another love-struck moment? I thought he mistook me for Josephine. So I grabbed his chin, ready to give him 2 more slaps. But then he said, "You like me focusing on my career, so I worked hard to grow the company. You like money, so I worked hard to earn it for you. Why don't you like me back?" His voice grew fainter, and after saying the last sentence, he immediately fell into a deep sleep. I stood by his bed for a long time without moving. At that moment, my silence was deafening. I couldn't figure out where the problem lay. Could it be that this love-struck mindset is an ultimate bug that can't be fixed? If it's not reflected in the female lead, then it has to be reflected in someone else. I thought carefully. George is a man with money, looks, and a great figure, yet he's such a hopeless romantic. He wouldn't be a bad boyfriend, it seems. Wait, stop right there. My dream is to make money. Men will only slow down my money-counting speed. I quickly pushed this terrifying thought out of my mind. I quickly escaped back to my room. The next day, George saw nothing unusual about me. His gaze was exceptionally gentle. I awkwardly looked away. My mind was screaming, "Someone save this child." After George's relentless efforts, and after getting drunk 6 times, the client finally softened their stance and agreed to renew the contract. Great news brings joy to all. When I heard the news, I was moved to tears. If I continue spending every day with George like this, I won't be able to hold on much longer. His gaze grows more explicit by the day, and his actions become bolder with each passing moment. He fusses over me with warmth and care, attending to every detail, making it seem like he's the assistant and I'm the boss. It was then that I realized I don't actually dislike people who are obsessed with love. I just dislike it when the object of that obsession isn't me. After signing the contract, I decisively submitted my resignation. "I disagree." George paced around me like a lion trapped in a cage. "Isn't the company doing well enough now? Why are you leaving?" I remained completely unmoved and told him the reason I had prepared long ago. "I want to start my own business and be my own boss. It's the ultimate dream of every employee." A few days ago, the final 10 million promised by Mrs. Green was deposited. I now have over 30 million in my hands at the moment. I feel extremely confident. George seemed to suddenly understand something, his tone growing somber. "I know you're lying to me. Is it my feelings that are burdening you?" He had a hurt expression on his face, and I couldn't help but feel a bit sorry for him. I wanted to comfort him. So I said, "Hey, don't get me wrong, but you're actually quite self-aware." George eventually agreed to my resignation. The day I left, he held on to my resignation letter and wouldn't let go. "Can we still be friends in the future?" I tugged hard, but couldn't pull it out. So I had no choice but to reply helplessly, "Of course. Can I call you then?" "Sure. Can I come see you?" "That's fine, too." George was overjoyed. "Really? You won't change your mind and block me, will you?" "Of course. It's true." I looked at him, baffled. "What are you thinking? You still owe me over 4 million. How could I possibly block you?" My company was quickly and smoothly established. George personally guided me, introduced me to clients, took me to investor conferences, and helped me build connections. I thought about refusing, But I couldn't bring myself to do it because I earned way too much. In just 1 year, my company grew rapidly. I was too busy to even eat. George came to my company every day with prepared meals. When the company was choosing a location, George helped me negotiate a low price for the building across the street. It's only separated from his company by one street. I can see him just by looking up from my office. For instance, right now, when I see that his side is empty, I know he has already come over. Sure enough, not long after, the secretary came over carrying a lunchbox and said, "Lisa, this is the lunch your boyfriend brought for you." Normally, he would shamelessly squeeze in and eat with me, but today, he actually went back by himself. I asked the secretary, "Where is he?" He put down the things and left. The secretary hesitated before saying, "I think I saw a lady pull him away." I soon found out who this lady was. Just after I finished my meal, Mrs. Green came over. She held my hand affectionately and said, "George told me everything. You two are dating. Why didn't you tell me?" No wonder he refused to meet any of the girls I introduced him to. "Auntie, we're not dating." I couldn't even finish saying it myself. Over the past 2 years, he has taken me to all kinds of public events, treated me with utmost sincerity, and brought me meals every day. Even the cleaning lady in our company knows that Green from the building across the street is always my boyfriend. Mrs. Green smiled knowingly. She took off a vibrant green bracelet from her wrist and, without a word, slipped it onto mine. "This has been passed down in our family to the daughter-in-law. Now, I entrust it to you." I stared at the bracelet in astonishment. Only after Mrs. Green had left, beaming with joy, did I snap out of it and go find George. Faced with my questioning, George looked very wronged. "She found out on her own. How could I lie to her? You can just tell her we're friends. That's all." George slumped into the chair, hanging his head in silence. A pang of guilt rose in my heart. "What's wrong with you? So, you just wanted to have some fun with me and never intended to take things seriously. You don't even want to admit it when we're caught. My mom keeps forcing me to go on blind dates every day. So, I had to tell her I already have someone I like. Maybe that's why she's been following me." I wanted to comfort him, but what came out of my mouth was, "You're not going to start acting all suicidal again, are you?" George suddenly looked up, his eyes red and his lips trembling with anger. "Don't worry, I won't. I'll explain it to my mom so you won't be put in an awkward position." I didn't dare to look at him, so I just replied stiffly, "Then I'll trouble you with that." Not hearing his response, I looked at him in confusion and noticed he was staring intently at my wrist. Only then did I realize and quickly tried to pull it off. Who would have thought that although the bracelet seemed loose on my wrist, it was actually difficult to remove? I tried several times but couldn't get it off. In the end, my hand was red all over. George grabbed my hand and said, "Stop picking at it." He held my wrist tenderly and blew on it, his voice full of concern. "I'll buy her another one just like it." George held my hand in his, gently massaging the reed area. There was a hint of a sob in his voice. "Can we not break up?" At this moment, the guilt in my heart reached its peak. I reached out and pinched his chin, lifting it up. "When did I say we were breaking up?" George was stunned. "Then what about this bracelet?" I lifted my wrist to look at it in the sunlight. "It's so beautiful. I'll just wear it like this." George was so overjoyed he didn't know what to do. He spun me around in place a few times, then set me down on the office desk. He lowered his head to meet my gaze, his eyes sparkling like they held stars. "Thank you for being willing to accept me." Side story 1. Before getting married, I took George to do a prenuptial agreement. He refused to go no matter what. "Did someone say you're after my money?" "I know you're not." I was speechless. He was overthinking it. "I'm actually afraid he's after my money. Although the Green family has a vast fortune, I earn quite a bit myself." Now that he said this, it makes it hard for me to bring it up. Seeing that I didn't speak, George thought he had guessed right and immediately rolled up his sleeves angrily, saying that I asked there really who said it. "Look at that. It seems like you're about to get into a fight with someone." My temples were throbbing, and I couldn't hold back any longer. I said it. "You're not afraid, but I am. I'm afraid you'll covet my money. Do you understand now?" George thought he had misheard. He froze in disbelief for a long time before finally lowering his head slowly. You're actually this guarded against me. Do you not love me? I glare at him. Don't be dramatic. I hate it when men act like that the most. In the end, George still agreed to the notarization, but he made one request. I thought he was going to propose some self-serving terms, but then he said, notarization is fine, but from now on, all the money I earn will be handed over to you. All household expenses will come from that, and the money you earn can be saved for yourself. To be honest, it's been a long time since I've been left speechless like this. I want to find the author of this book and bow down to her. Her portrayal of George as a love-struck character is absolutely brilliant. On the day of the notarization, George handed me a stack of documents. He looked so mysterious that I thought he had some hidden assets I didn't know about. But when I took a look, I was so startled that I jumped up from my chair. I actually own 10% of his company's shares. What does this mean? This is the over 4 million I owed you back then. When I tried to repay you, you refused. So, I directly converted it into shares for you. He looked quite pleased with himself. After the company went public, its value has increased at least 100-fold now. I originally wanted that money, but later I received Mrs. Green's bracelet, which is worth tens of millions, and now I can't take it off. So, when George returned the money, I felt too embarrassed to accept it. This unexpected surprise left me completely dazed, and I was in a foggy state until the notarization was completed. Extra Chapter 2. While we were preparing for the wedding, Josephine got divorced. I heard that, after marriage, her husband forced her to sell her bags and jewelry to help cover household expenses. When there was nothing left to sell, he made her go back to her parents, the Smiths, to ask for money. Josephine was unwilling and was even beaten by him several times. This matter even made it into the social news, causing quite a stir. Smith's father and Smith's mother also avoided seeing her. In the end, Josephine actually went to find George. The secretary told her that Mr. Green was not in. She still refused to leave. She even claimed to be someone George liked and demanded that the secretary treat her well. As a result, she waited for several days in vain. Later, she finally gave up, and just as George had returned, she caught him red-handed. She tearfully said she regretted it, that she shouldn't have broken off the engagement with George, and asked him to lend her some more money. George remained unmoved. I can't help you. At most, I can only help you call the police. Why not? Josephine couldn't believe it. You used to always grant my every request. Didn't you like me a lot? I don't want too much. Just give me 2 million. George remained silent for a long time and finally let out a deep sigh. I'm really curious. Where does your confidence come from? What makes you think someone will always like you? Joe's fine. George continued to be honest. When I think about the things I did for you before, I feel like I was out of my mind. Having lost George, her devoted admirer, Josephine completely broke down, crying and making a scene in George's office. George directly called Smith's father and asked him to take his daughter back. Smith's father arrived quickly. He instructed the driver to take Josephine into the car. Then he solemnly apologized to George Smith Sr., who had been prominent all his life, had no choice but to lower his head and apologize to a younger generation for his daughter. Before Smith Sr. left, George handed him a stack of documents. Inside were various luxury bills signed by Josephine using his name, and even the repair costs for the car Josephine had crashed. Overwhelmed with shame, Smith Sr. immediately transferred the money back, including interest. Extra story 3 later, I heard that Mr. Smith gave Josephine's husband a large sum of money. That man finally agreed to the divorce. Half a year later, at George's and my wedding, Josephine came to the banquet with Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Long time no see. I almost didn't recognize her. Although she was dressed stylishly, there was a hint of timidity in her expression. For years of marriage had completely stripped Miss Smith of her former arrogance. When she noticed us looking at her, she immediately lowered her head. George was a little angry. Should we just kick her out? It's such a joyous occasion for our wedding. But she's sitting there with a long face. It's so unlucky. The corner of my mouth twitched. Then why did you even send her an invitation? George looked puzzled. She gave a gift when she got married. If I didn't send her an invitation, how would I get my money back? After hearing the first story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Next, there is another similar story. Let's continue to see. Waking up, I found myself in the role of an old-school, abusive, domineering CEO, seeing my son willing to die for his white moonlight. I slapped him across the face, seeing my daughter-in-law kneeling in the rain while heavily pregnant. I slapped my son across the face, seeing the white moonlight, using manipulative words to frame others. I slapped my son across the face. My son grabbed my hand. Mom, I'm the only heir of our family. I sneered and slapped him again with the back of my hand. You little brat. I'll just have your dad, and I reincarnate another one someday. My husband seemed about to say something, but I raised my hand again. You don't want to. George's lips trembled. Yes, I guarantee it will be born while going down the stairs. He lost focus for a moment, missed a step, and hit the stairs hard. An unfamiliar mechanical voice echoed in his mind. Dramatic revision system has been bound. Countless fragments of memories flooded my mind, and I found myself unexpectedly recalling my original memories. It turned out that the world I was in was just a romance novel I had read before, where the male lead tormented the female lead, both physically and emotionally, often leaving me with a sense of helplessness, as if I couldn't slap the screen. In the end, I died young due to breast nodules, and when I woke up again, I had already become one of the characters in the book, the mother of that physically and emotionally abusive domineering male lead, because my anger towards the character has reached the threshold. The system has granted me the authority to revise the plot as long as I correct the absurd 100% melodramatic storyline of this novel. I can return to my original world. At the moment, the plot has reached the point where the white moonlight returns and tells the male lead that the reason she left him back then was because she had an incurable illness. My rebellious son immediately believed it and is now desperately trying to save the white moonlight, threatening to make all the doctors in the city pay with their lives if she isn't cured. I jolted awake, realizing I couldn't let this idiot's son continue to embarrass me. I opened my eyes abruptly only to find my hand tightly held by someone. George noticed I was awake, paused, and calmly withdrew his hand. You're awake. Are you feeling unwell anywhere? I looked at my husband in front of me and couldn't help but feel speechless, realizing that the person I had spent so many years with was merely a character from a book. I picked up the blanket and lay back down. George, my head is so dizzy. I feel terrible. George frowned, his gaze shifting toward the family doctor beside him. Dr. James broke into a sweat. Mr. Green, we've already conducted a thorough examination. Your wife just has a bump from the fall, with some medication to promote blood circulation and reduce swelling. She'll recover quickly. What about Frank? His mother nearly died from the fall, and he still hasn't come to see me. George glanced at me a few times, then asked Dr. James to examine me again before stepping out to make a phone call. Dr. James, holding the medical device, was sweating. Ma'am, what else is bothering you? I chuckled. It's nothing. I'll feel better once Frank comes back. After receiving George's call, Frank quickly returned home before even entering the door. I could hear his bubbly voice. Dad, what's the emergency? I'm in the middle of something over here. As soon as he pushed the door open and saw me lying listlessly on the bed, Frank was clearly startled. He hurried over, dropping his usual tone, and asked anxiously, Mom, what's wrong with you? Frank looks very much like me, almost as if we were cast from the same mold. Only those eyes are like George's, deep and passionate, giving off a playboy vibe at first glance. I called out weakly to Frank, gesturing for him to come closer. Frank, come to Mommy. Frank hurried to my bedside, and I sprang up from the bed with lightning speed, full of energy, swinging my arm in a full arc. I gave him a resounding slap. A loud smack echoed, stinging my hand from the impact. George was stunned. Frank was stunned. And Dr. James packed up his things without looking up and made a quick exit. This slap is for your fickleness. Frank stood there in a daze, staring at me. In all his life, he had probably never been hit like this before. As the only son of the Green family, George was gentle and kind, and I had my own reasons for being virtuous. At most, I would scold him a few times, but I had never laid a hand on him. His life had been smooth sailing, but after awakening, I deeply realized that it was George's and my indulgence that had nurtured such a monster. This twisted plot, I'm going to slap it back into shape. I switched hands and slapped him again. This slap is for your cold-blooded heartlessness. This slap is for your Frank snapped back to reality, took half a step back to dodge my slap, and looked at me in disbelief. Mom, why did you hit me for no reason? I was furious. Let me ask you, why did you skip work and go to the hospital? Frank paused for a moment. Nicole is sick. Oh, Nicole is sick. You're such a rare good man. You're not related to her at all. What does her being sick have to do with you? Why do you have to take care of her? Frank said, Mom, you know as well as I do that Nicole went abroad for my sake back then. I can't just abandon her. Don't get too close to me. I have megalophobia. I'm afraid of huge idiots back then. She hid the fact that she was sick and broke up with you to go abroad because she didn't want to upset you. Now, she's shamelessly come back to cry to you about her illness. Does she think you won't be upset now? And what kind of terminal illness drags on for so many years? If it hasn't been cured after all this time, why isn't she dead yet? Even if we take a huge step back and assume she really is sick, did you cause her illness? What does it have to do with you, whether she gets better or not? Frank, don't forget your current status. You're married to Oilia. You have a family. Hearing Oilia's name, Frank's voice became resentful. If it weren't for Nicole leaving back then, I would never have married that woman. Nicole meant something different to me. She was the first woman I ever loved in my life. All right, you're so noble. I clapped my hands. I'll call Alia right now since you hate her so much. Both of you should sign the divorce papers today and not waste her precious youth. Of course, since you had an emotional affair, you'll leave with nothing. Seeing that I was actually taking out my phone, Frank panicked again and desperately tried to stop me from making the call. His indecisiveness made my hands itch, and just as I was about to slap this unfilled son again, someone grabbed my wrist. I glared at George with dissatisfaction. George, why are you stopping me from disciplining my son? Look at what he's become now. How dare he have the audacity to say that if Nicole can't be cured, all the doctors in the city will have to pay with their lives. I don't know who he learned this disgraceful behavior from. Frank's gaze instinctively turned toward George. George's expression stiffened, and he looked up at the sky very unnaturally. I pointed at Frank's nose. Looking at your dad won't help. No one can save you today. I'm really laughing myself to death. So, you want to be buried with me? Well, today I'll show you who buries whom first. George, let go of me. George rubbed the palm of my hand, looked up, and sighed, hitting so hard. Aren't you afraid of hurting your hand? He took half a step back, clenched his fist, and before I could react, George had already punched Frank in the face. His strength is much greater than mine. Frank staggered, barely catching himself on the edge of the table to avoid falling, and a red, swollen mark immediately appeared on his face. He covered half of his face and muttered in disbelief, Dad, for over 20 years, Frank had been reckless and unrestrained. But now he finally experienced a mixed doubles beating from both his parents. Frank was convinced physically, though his eyes were filled with anger and dissatisfaction. He no longer talked about curing Nicole at every turn. I was also tired of scolding him, so I took the water cup from George and moistened my throat. That's it for today. If I catch you acting crazy again, I'll slap you again. All right, nothing else. You should head back to the hospital now. Frank widened his eyes, completely baffled as to why I had called him out of the hospital just to beat him up and then told him to go back. I didn't tell you to look for Nicole. It's Oilia. She was in a car accident right next to Nicole's hospital room. Frank's face turned pale. Yes, the story is just that melodramatic. We have no idea why those with terminal illnesses and those who got into car accidents ended up on the same floor. In the original book, at this point, Frank was completely preoccupied with his first love, who had returned to the country, busily attending to Nicole in the hospital and ignoring all of his wife's missed calls. At that moment, Oilia happened to be involved in a minor accident, hitting her head. She tried calling Frank, but the line was always busy, so she had to take a taxi to the hospital to get her wound bandaged. There, she happened to see her husband showing an unfamiliar tenderness to another woman. Feeling disheartened, Oilia was then informed by the doctor that she was 2 months pregnant. The story then revolves around this pregnancy, unfolding over 600 chapters with themes such as whether to have an abortion, the mystery of the child's paternity. The only cure for the white moonlight's illness is the child's umbilical cord blood. And Mr. Green, stop tormenting her. The wife has run away with the child. Just thinking about it gives me a headache. Frank, the instigator, is still yelling in front of me. A car accident. How is that possible? That woman is probably trying to play hard to get again. Mom, don't be fooled by her. The corner of my mouth twitched, and I raised my hand. Frank instinctively flinched to the side. Are you going or not? I'll give you 3 seconds. 3, 2, Frank dashed off in a flash. I instructed the driver to make sure Frank was taken to Oilia's hospital room, and only then did I feel a sense of relief. Holding my still, slightly swollen and aching head, I lay down leisurely. George silently watched me, his expression unreadable. Kathy, how did you know Oilia was in a car accident? I fell down the stairs and was unconscious for a while. And this happened at the same time as Frank's hospital madness and Oilia's car accident from George's perspective. I really shouldn't have known about these things as soon as I woke up, but I couldn't say I read it in a book, so I brushed it off. Even as a married couple, we all have our little secrets. A tactful man knows not to ask questions he shouldn't. George laughed, and as advised, didn't press further. Frank irritably ran his fingers through his hair and opened his phone only to see several missed calls from Oilia. His finger hovered over the callback button, but he couldn't bring himself to press it. His first encounter with Oilia hadn't been a pleasant one. Back then, someone had drugged him at a hotel, and Oilia, who was working part-time there, accidentally stumbled into his room. It all happened so suddenly. Someone took photos of him and Oilia, intending to sell them for a good price, but George intercepted them. George held the photos and asked calmly what he intended to do. Frank had always been afraid of his quiet father, especially since he was the one at fault this time. So Frank gritted his teeth and said that I will marry her. He could only give Oilia the title of Mrs. Green, nothing more. He never considered Oilia to be the kind of person he would like. What he liked were flowers like Nicole, carefully nurtured and cultivated in a greenhouse, bright and vibrant, not someone like Oilia, who always kept her eyes downcast, reflecting a dull pain. Just looking at her made him unhappy, and even during intimate moments, he would force her to close her eyes. The more he noticed the differences between Oilia and Nicole, the more resentment grew in his heart. This shouldn't be his marriage. But he couldn't divorce Oilia. Ah, why couldn't he divorce Oilia? Now his true love has returned to him, and the turmoil from that previous incident has gradually subsided. As long as he settles things with Oilia, I believe his parents won't have anything to say. Divorcing Oilia, then Frank muttered to himself, his brow furrowing with displeasure. There's a subtle discomfort in my heart, a feeling that's hard to describe. Mr. Green, are you here to see Miss Nicole again? You're so attentive to her. Frank paused. No. Which room is Oilia in? The nurse was taken aback, picked up the register, and flipped through it. Oilia, the one who was in the multi-car accident today. Frank's heart tightened, and he grabbed the nurse's wrist abruptly. What happened to her? Where is she? Tell me right now. If anything happens to her, I'll make this entire hospital. Frank was about to utter a harsh remark, but suddenly remembered his mother's slap, so he simply shut his mouth. In room 302, Frank quickened his pace and eventually broke into a run. Oilia's room turned out to be right next to Nicole's. Yet today, he had been running around solely for Nicole, completely unaware that his wife, just a wall away, had been in such a serious car accident. Frank's face grew increasingly pale, his hands clenched so tightly that his fingernails almost dug into his flesh. A belated fear washed over him, and Frank couldn't stop praying. Oilia, you must be okay. As long as you're safe, I promise I'll treat you. The hospital room door opened, but the expected tragedy did not occur. Oilia was sitting perfectly fine on the hospital bed, with the only injury being a scrape on her forehead. Frank had just breathed a sigh of relief when another wave of anger surged in his heart because he saw Oilia smiling charmingly at the doctor in front of her. She had never smiled at him like that. Even now, the face that had just been smiling so tenderly turned cold the moment he saw him. Frank sneered. He knew this doctor. He was Oilia's childhood friend. He had looked into their relationship, and it was indeed very close. He strode over, ignoring the others present, and pulled Oilia up from the bed. Oilia, I underestimated you. Your acting skills have become so refined, even performing in front of my mother. Come back with me quickly and explain everything to my mother. Ouch! Oilia winced in pain as she was abruptly pulled up. Charles restrained Frank's movement. You're hurting her. Oh, what does it have to do with you? Dr. Chong, this is a matter between us as a married couple. You've overstepped. Charles was also angry. If you truly consider Oilia your wife, you should have been by her side after her car accident today, not staying with another woman. Upon hearing this, Oilia's fingers trembled slightly. Oilia, you call her that quite affectionately. Frank didn't notice Oilia's movement. He had already held a grudge against Charles, and now, with an excuse, he grabbed the other's collar. Oilia is mine. The two were at daggers drawn, almost coming to blows at the critical moment. The hospital room door was abruptly pushed open again. A dignified, noble woman strode in angrily in high heels. In front of everyone, she raised her hand and slapped Frank twice. You wretched thing. I told you to care for your wife, not to get jealous and start a fight with that resounding slap. The system prompt sounded at just the right moment, avoiding ineffective conflict. Current level of drama 80%. That was close. That was close. Luckily, I made it, lying in bed. I recalled the plot of the original book, and the more I lay there, the more uneasy I felt. I remember in the original book, after Frank found out Alia was pregnant, he initially intended to stay with her, but due to Nicole's scheming, he ended up believing the child wasn't his. But for Nicole to frame someone, she would need a target, right? I couldn't remember who the child's biological father was until Dr. James came back to take my blood pressure. I stared at his white coat for a long time. George stood nearby with his arms crossed and said that Dr. James, that's a nice outfit you have. Dr. James was sweating. Ma'am, please stop staring. If you really like it, I can send you the link. Suddenly, it dawned on me. The person who was mistaken for having an affair with Oilia was none other than her attending physician, Charles. Charles was the first to know about Oilia's pregnancy. Because Oilia was unsure about whether to keep the child, she asked Charles to keep her pregnancy a secret. Little did she expect that, after the truth came to light, this matter would become the basis for Oilia's guilty conscience. According to the current timeline, Frank is going to the hospital room to find Alia, and the three of them are likely to run into each other. Dr. James looked at my suddenly soaring blood pressure in horror, and I threw off the blanket and got up. George stopped me. Kathy, you're not well yet. Where are you going? With a grave expression, I said, cleaning house. George offered to accompany me, and I scratched my head, wondering why he was acting so strangely today. Normally, he would have gone back to the company by now. Why was he suddenly so clingy today? George, I just remembered there's another matter I need you to handle. I whispered in his ear. George hesitated. That doesn't seem appropriate. Then I beg you, after realizing this is a world from a book. I have completely let go of all my burdens. Please, I beg you. George. George said, all right. Mom, how did you get here? Oilia looked somewhat flustered. She stood up in a panic, lowered her eyes, and seemed a bit timid. Although Oilia and Frank have been married for 3 years, we don't live together. We only see each other a few times a year during holidays. So she and I are not very familiar with each other because of a car accident. Oilia's already pale face looked even more pitiful. She had no relatives left on her mother's side. On her husband's side, there was only a silent father-in-law, a domineering mother-in-law, and a cheating husband. Thinking about it, Oilia really is quite pitiful. I held her hand and sat her down with concern. Oilia, how are you feeling? If that wretched boy ignores you, you still have your mom. Why didn't you tell me about the car accident? Oilia pursed her lips. Mom, I'm fine. Frank snorted coldly from the side. Mom, now you've heard it. She's just pretending to be pitiful. It's just a minor injury. Yet you're making such a big fuss by coming to the hospital. Who knows? Maybe you're just using this as an excuse to see someone. Oilia lowered her eyelashes and remained silent, but I was close enough to see her trembling shoulders. You, Charles said with a look of anger. Oh, you know how dangerous the situation was. If Oilia hadn't been lucky, if the wound had been just a fraction off, she could have been paralyzed for life. And besides, she's still. Frank clenched his jaw, his eyes filled with fury. If I hadn't been there, he would have surely started a fight with Charles again. This is between me and her. What's it to you? Frank yelled, and I yelled even louder. Frank, are you crazy? If I weren't afraid of scaring Oilia, I would have given him a couple more hits. So what? What answer do you want? Does it have to be that Oilia is seriously injured in a car accident or even loses her life, and you only care about your old flame and neglect her? Only then will you hypocritically come to regret, feel guilty, and treat her well. Frank's pupils contracted, his lips trembling slightly. His gaze turned to Alia, a flicker of fear in his eyes. But isn't she fine now? I sneered. Nothing works for you, and everything works for you. Young Master Gu, you're really hard to please. I didn't want anything to happen to her. I said, you shouldn't be saying that to me. Frank fell silent for a long moment, his shoulders slumping. He walked over to Oilia and carefully knelt down in front of her. Oilia, is there anywhere else you're feeling uncomfortable aside from this wound? Have you had a full checkup? What did the doctor say? The system beeped in my mind. Misunderstanding level decreased. Current drama level, 60%. Oilia paused, then softly answered Frank's question. Charles watched the scene, closed his eyes briefly, and retreated outside the door. Normally, this would be the couple's private time, and I should have tactfully stepped out as well. But I knew exactly what was about to happen next. So, I simply vacated the spot next to Oilia, crossed my legs, and plopped down on the sofa. Frank's greatest physical advantage is his eyes. He doesn't even need to say much. Just by gazing at someone so intently, he can create the illusion of deep affection out of thin air. After hearing Oilia's answer, he still felt uneasy and asked to see her medical report. Oilia lowered her gaze, fiddling with her fingers, as if she had finally made up her mind about something. Mom, Frank, I have something to tell you. Frank, deeply. Is there something wrong with the test results? No. Oilia shook her head, a smile curling at the corner of her mouth. Frank, actually, why should I transfer hospitals if I don't want to? Outside the ward, a sudden commotion erupted, mingled with the soothing words of many people. Among them, a clear, bright female voice stood out the most. Do you know what Frank and I are to each other? Who gave you the nerve? It was Nicole's voice. Frank abruptly stood up, about to walk out, but Oilia grabbed his hand, holding it tightly, her gaze pleading. Frank, what I'm about to say is very important. I rested my chin on my hand, waiting with Oilia for Frank's response. But then I saw Frank pull his hand away from Oilia's. Just a moment. Oilia, I'll come back to you in a little while. I crossed my arms and stood up. Frank looked at me wearily, covering his face. I spread my hands. Go if you want. I won't stop you this time. I hope you won't regret it later. I wonder if Frank realizes that this is the last chance Oilia will ever give him. Unfortunately, he missed the one and only opportunity. Isn't Nicole supposed to be gravely ill? I asked George to transfer Nicole from the city hospital to the best hospital abroad. Whether she's sick or not, it's only natural to get a thorough checkup to find out. Nicole was unwilling, and so was Frank. Nicole was sent abroad, and Frank followed her, leaving behind his wife, who hadn't fully recovered from her illness, and his elderly mother, who was waiting to give him a scolding. Of course, I knew what Oilia didn't say at the hospital. It was about her pregnancy. I gave Oilia two options. Oilia, you can keep the baby. If you need help, I can assist in raising the child. But if you want nothing more to do with Frank, I'll respect that and never disturb you again. I'll provide enough financial support to ensure you and the child live comfortably. Of course, if you don't want to keep the baby, I can arrange for you to have the procedure at the best hospital. In fact, I'd recommend this option. You're still so young. Having a child now could limit many of your future opportunities. Whatever you decide, I'll help you arrange everything. You're so talented. I'm sure you'll quickly establish yourself in society during this time with Oilia. She and I have become quite familiar. She didn't answer my question directly, just clutched the divorce papers that had been returned once again. But what about Frank? I let out a cold laugh. That scoundrel really wants to have his cake and eat it too. He chased after another woman abroad. Yet every divorce document Oilia sent him was torn up and sent back without exception. Oilia, let me tell you, divorce is out of the question. Can you stop being so childish? How many times do I have to tell you Nicole can't do without me here? Do you really have to use such methods to force me to return to the country? I'm telling you, doing this will only make me more and more annoyed with you. I watched Oilia's face grow increasingly pale as she held her phone, and I motioned for her to hand it to me. Frank, want to try acting tough again? Frank fell silent. You can stay away for all I care. Your mother just signed up for boxing classes, and my hands are itching to try them out on you when you get back. A busy tone came from the phone. Frank had hung up. I cracked my knuckles loudly. Oilia, don't worry about Frank. If you want a divorce, I have 10,000 ways to make sure he never bothers you again. Mom, but Frank is your son. Why would you? I curved my lips and ruffled her hair. It was rare for an elder to show such affection toward her. She widened her eyes and looked at me like a startled little squirrel. Oilia, you forgot. Now you're my daughter, too. Oh, right. Not after the divorce. But it's okay. You can still be my go-daughter. Haha. Oilia's eyes glistened as she nodded at me vigorously. In the end, Oilia chose to keep the child. I wasn't very surprised by this outcome. I respect any decision she makes. I bought a new house in the city center under her name so she can rest peacefully during her pregnancy. George doesn't understand why I went to such lengths. I turned my back to him, lying on the bed, and yawned. Do you have a problem with that? George shook his head. If it makes you happy. But Kathy, he wanted to say more, but I waved my hand, not in the mood to listen any further. George found out that Frank bought a flight back home tomorrow now that Oilia is already showing her pregnancy. I have to go to the airport early in the morning to catch that rebellious son of mine before he does something utterly outrageous again. George closed his mouth. He was always a man of few words, and I don't know why he's been so talkative lately, so fond of chattering. He lay down behind me, somewhat puzzled. Kathy, it seems like it's been a long time since you've kissed me. I closed my eyes, not asleep, yet I remained unmoved upon hearing George's words. Never mind, George said. Good night. Kathy, we had to say good night before sleeping, and share a morning kiss upon waking up. This was a rule I had forced George to agree to right after we got married, because I knew George didn't like me. I always thought that if I turned affection into a tangible habit, day by day, even if he didn't love me at first, he might come to love me a little more. I snuggled into the blanket, half asleep, my mind filled with many thoughts, both the entanglement between Frank and Oilia in the original book and the past between George and me. The situation between George and me has a striking resemblance to that of Oilia and Frank. George also has his own white moonlight. He prefers my sister over me. Fortunately, on the eve of the wedding, my sister eloped with a wandering painter as a second choice. He picked me, but I genuinely liked George. I've liked him since we were children. At first, he was very cold to me, often didn't come home, and wasn't by my side when I gave birth. But I endured all of this. I reigned in my flamboyant personality and became virtuous and gentle. I was imitating my sister, hoping that, by doing so, George would like me a little more. Later, George did indeed slowly become better and better to me. He started to care about me, to show concern for me, but I don't know whether his feelings come out of habit or out of love. Yet, I am content. It doesn't matter if he doesn't love me. At least he can't do without me anymore. Even up until the moment before I recalled the original story's plot, I still thought this way. So, I'm trying so hard to change the path that was set for Oilia in the original book. Perhaps it's also an attempt to pull myself out of the prison I was trapped in years ago, blinded by love. I barely slept all night, and just as I managed to doze off for a bit, I was jolted awake by the system's sharp alert. Detected a significant surge in the plot's melodrama. Please quickly reduce the melodrama level. No matter how much you guard against it, something still goes wrong. The city issued a typhoon warning. To avoid the typhoon, Frank changed his flight to an earlier one and returned overnight. So I wasn't able to meet up with him. The reason he was in such a hurry to come back was quite simple and straightforward. Nicole somehow got hold of photos of Oilia entering and leaving the prenatal checkup center and whispered in Frank's ear, saying things like, "Miss Song is pregnant. It looks like you're going to be a dad." According to the report, Miss Song is 5 months pregnant. But Frank, didn't you go abroad with me half a year ago? Oh, I didn't say anything. Nicole is stirring up trouble, and that's not right of her. But if you ask me, it's also because Frank is a complete idiot, getting so worked up over just a couple of sentences. He first returned home and learned from the servant that Oilia hadn't been back there for the past 6 months. Then somehow, he managed to get Oilia's current address. Seeing her heavily pregnant belly, he completely believed Nicole's words and even assumed the house she was living in was bought for her by her lover. On a day of pouring rain, he actually forced Oilia to kneel in the rain, demanding to know who the father of her child was. Oilia was stubborn, too, gritting her teeth and refusing to say a word. In the end, she collapsed in the rain with a high fever. Hearing this, I'm about to faint from anger. 2. What about Oilia? How is she now? George said that she's in the emergency room. Frank is with her at the hospital. I rolled my eyes and hurriedly grabbed my bag to rush to the hospital. Frank sat at the door of the operating room, his knuckles white from clenching. He hadn't slept all night either, his hair falling over his forehead, his face haggard and looking worse than death. When he saw me approaching, it was as if he had finally regained his senses. He stood up in a panic, flustered and at a loss, asking me, "Mom, blood, what do we do? She's lost so much blood." I slapped him, the force so strong that his face jerked to the side, a red mark instantly appearing on his cheek. Yet, as if he felt nothing, his fingers trembled uncontrollably. I stopped what I was doing when I saw his reaction. Hitting him now might actually make him feel better. "Mom, did I do something wrong?" I was speechless. Well, what else? He grabbed his own hair, slumped against the wall, and sat down on the floor. I didn't mean for this to happen. I just didn't want to have any regrets. I wanted to settle things with Nicole and then come back to live a good life with Oilia. I really never meant to hurt her. I leaned down and patted his face. "Is this all it takes to break you? The worst is yet to come. You think you have it all figured out, don't you? Leaving your wife behind to go abroad and take care of your mistress, then coming back to play the role of the good husband. So you get to be the good guy in every situation. And do you really think Nicole's so-called illness can actually be cured?" Frank looked up at me, bewildered. "She knows this excuse is the only way to keep you by her side. Why would she let go of that opportunity? How long are you planning to stay with her? A year? 2 years? What if her illness never gets better? Will you just stay abroad with her forever? What about Oilia? Should Oilia just wait here for you willingly?" Frank said it won't be that long. "I've talked to the doctor, and Nicole's illness will be cured in at most another 6 months. It's not like she wanted to get this kind of illness. She suffers every day from the treatment. Has this son been kicked in the head by a donkey? Oh, then would you like to guess where Nicole, who should be in the hospital receiving treatment right now after you return to the country, actually is?" Frank snapped back to reality, pulled out his phone, and made a call. As his expression grew increasingly grim, it was clear the outcome was far from ideal. Satisfied to hear the prompt indicating a drop in the drama level, I seized the moment and pulled out a prenatal paternity test from my bag. I had prepared this a long time ago to deal with the upcoming plot twists, but I never expected to use it under these circumstances. I threw the report in his face and said coldly, "Are you satisfied with this answer?" Frank was as if struck by lightning, his fingers tightly gripping the sheet of paper. The black and white text was far more convincing than what Nicole had presented. The door to the operating room was pushed open, and a nurse walked out, calling loudly, "Ohia, who is Oilia's family." Frank stumbled forward. I am her husband." The nurse glanced at him, her tone reproachful. "The patient is out of danger, but unfortunately, the baby couldn't be saved." "What kind of husband are you?" "A 26-week pregnant woman, and you didn't rush her to the hospital when she had a fever, letting her get drenched in the rain for so long. At 26 weeks, the fetus is already mostly formed." The brain responded to the touch, and occasionally, when Oilia placed her hand on her belly, she would look up at me with surprise and delight. "Mom, I think the baby just kicked me." I'm not entirely sure what emotions she's feeling toward Frank right now, but she has a deep love for the child in her womb as the one who started all this. I don't understand how Frank has the nerve to act heartbroken here. The one who is clearly suffering more now is Oilia. Oilia woke up from the anesthesia to see Frank kneeling by her bedside. "I was wrong, Oilia. I really know I was wrong. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You actually, why don't you hit me or scold me? I'll accept it all. I didn't mean to hurt you. Really, Oilia, I was just too scared. I was afraid you were really going to leave me." His eyes were bloodshot, and seeing Oilia's indifferent expression, the mask of strength he always wore finally shattered. "Oilia, a child. We can have another child. Just look at me. As long as you can forgive me, I'll agree to anything you ask." Hearing this, Oilia finally opened her dry, cracked lips. "Do you really mean anything?" Frank nodded repeatedly. Oilia closed her eyes. "Let's get a divorce." "I don't want anything. Frank, I want a divorce." Frank's heart plummeted into an abyss. He opened his mouth, but it took him a long moment to find his voice. "No, a divorce is not an option." This answer was within Oilia's expectations. She forced a smile, her lips curling reluctantly. "I just want a divorce." "Frank, how much do you hate me to torture me like this?" Frank was eager to explain. "I don't dislike you, Oilia. In fact, from the very first day I met you, I've been drawn to you. I never wanted to admit it, but I do like you," Oilia said with an indifferent expression. "Your love is terrifying. Frank, I will sue you. Domestic violence, marital infidelity. If you still want to preserve some dignity for both of us, sign the divorce papers. I won't see you again until you sign." Oilia gave him an ultimatum. Frank wasn't afraid of Oilia suing him. What he feared was that once things reached that point, there would truly be no turning back between them. Frank's lips trembled slightly. "All right, I'll sign. You still need someone to take care of you in your current condition. I'll sign whatever you want me to, but can you come home with me first? Let me take care of you." Oilia turned her head away. No. Oilia's determination to divorce was firm enough that the drama's absurdity level had already decreased significantly. Yet, that value stubbornly remained at 30%, refusing to drop any further. Logically speaking, the main couple is about to divorce, and I've been keeping a close watch on Frank, so there shouldn't be any drama left. I just can't figure out where the remaining melodrama is going to unfold until an unexpected character showed up at the door. I was still at Frank's place, helping Oilia pack the last of her belongings when a curly-haired woman wearing sunglasses confidently pushed the door open and walked in. Her cheeks were rosy, and she looked full of vitality, not at all like someone who was sick. Only a fool like Frank would fall for that. I straightened up, pursed my lips, and cracked my knuckles. I thought, I know where the last 30% is. When Nicole saw me, she immediately put on a smile and pretended to be familiar, trying to link arms with me. "Auntie, it's been a long time. What brings you here?" I shook off her hand. "Who are you?" "Butler. Why did you let just anyone in?" "Get her out." A hint of embarrassment flashed across Nicole's face as she quickly took off her sunglasses and explained. "Annie, It's me, Nicole. She tucked her hair behind her ear, looking shy. Later, Frank will probably introduce me to you all properly. I really laughed. This person is also a bit of a nutcase. As soon as she heard the news of Frank's divorce, she didn't even bother pretending to be sick anymore. Immediately showed up acting like the lady of the house and even dared to chatter and make a fuss in front of me. All right, I'll go and slap Frank to vent my anger later. You want to join the Green family? Wait until I'm dead. Nicole paused. Auntie, Frank and I are truly in love. 30 million. For a moment, her eyes showed a flicker of emotion. But after a brief silence, she continued, Auntie, my love for Frank can't be measured by money. Even if you offered me 30 million, I wouldn't leave him. You think too highly of yourself. I said that I'm telling you to give me 30 million, and I'll let Frank and you go your own way. Nicole could no longer maintain her smile. I couldn't be bothered to deal with her. So I made a call and ordered Frank to come over immediately to handle it. As soon as Nicole saw Frank, it was as if she had seen a savior. Frank, your mother seems to have some misunderstanding about me. Please speak up for me. Please step aside. These past few days, because of the divorce with Oilia, he had almost lost half his soul. He looked truly pitiful, but the scolding he deserved couldn't be avoided. I bypassed Nicole and slapped Frank first. Nicole stared at the scene in shock. I patted Frank's face. It's handled. If you let her run to Oilia again, you know I'll slap you again. Right. I turned my back and walked toward the door, leaving behind a few terrified screams from Nicole. Oilia just wants to divorce Frank as soon as possible. She was even willing to forgo the division of assets just to get rid of him quickly. I said that wouldn't do. So, while helping her with the divorce proceedings, I made sure she got the majority of Frank's assets. Frank felt guilty to begin with, so naturally he wouldn't refuse, and he didn't dare to refuse either. On the other hand, Oilia hesitated to accept it. Mom, this isn't appropriate. Let's just divide things as they should be. I don't want to take more than my share from him. I held her hand and said, this is what he owes you. In my opinion, you're actually taking too little. He should be made to live like a beggar. Oilia was still hesitant. She held my hand in return and said, Mom, I know you care about me, but I don't want to cause a rift between you and your son because of me. After the divorce, I'll leave this place, but Frank is different. You still have to live together. I said indifferently. Oh, what's the big deal? Everything Frank has now was given by George anyway. I'll talk to George later and split things up with him, so he doesn't keep mooching off us. But you, Oilia, if you're sad, don't hold it in. Don't let it make you sick. From the day Oilia woke up after the surgery to finding out she'd lost her child to signing the divorce papers, she didn't shed a single tear. No sadness, no breakdown, only a terrifying calm. Oilia paused, touched her nose, and smiled at me. Why would I be sad? Mom, like you said before, I'm still so young. This relationship was just a small episode in my life. Thanks to you, I'd become a little rich woman, and the best is yet to come. The more Oilia acted as if it were nothing, the more uneasy I felt. Oilia, you don't have to spare my feelings just because I'm Frank's mom. I've long given up on this son. If you want to scold him, go ahead. If you want to hit him, I'll help you do it. Oilia shook her head. He has nothing to do with me now. I have nothing to complain about him. How could you not? After all these years of marriage, has he ever truly regarded you as his wife? After all you've done for him at home, has he ever once said thank you? Besides, even after marrying you, he hasn't settled down. What does it mean that he still has another woman in his heart? And he even left his pregnant wife behind to go abroad. If he was really so deeply in love with Nicole, he should have remained faithful to her back then. Why did he get involved with you? It's like separating the person from the heart, isn't it? The more I spoke, the angrier I became. Most importantly, it was him who started this relationship in the first place. How dare he treat you like this? I stopped all my cursing. Oilia in front of me was already covered in tears. At first, it was quiet sobbing, which then turned into loud wailing, making my nose sting with emotion. She cried while cursing. Frank is such a jerk. I agreed with her. Having already detached myself from my identity as Frank's mother. Now I was the reader who had once been filled with the same fury while reading this novel, joining the tormented female protagonist in the original story to tear the male lead to shreds. By the end, Oilia was exhausted from all the cursing. I took a sip of water to moisten my throat and continued my furious tirade. And Frank's dad. I don't even want to talk about him. Oilia's eyes were red, and she froze for a moment upon hearing this. Dad, what's wrong with him? I'm so done with this. It's like I'm the only one who gave birth to this child, right? He doesn't even bother to discipline him. It's all because he's a bad influence. The older one loves playing the substitute game, and the younger one just follows suit. Oilia can join me in cursing Frank, but when it comes to George, she wisely keeps her mouth shut. Years of pent-up resentment burst out all at once. I tightly grasped Oilia's hand. Oilia, wait for me. I'll get a divorce from this forced marriage, too, and then we'll leave together. Let that pair of scoundrel father and son stay single. Oilia's pupils trembled, and her expression stiffened, as if she had seen something unsettling. Dad, I interrupted her. You don't need to speak for him. I'm going to divorce him today. Oilia quickly spoke up, raising her voice to drown out mine. Dad, what brings you here? I turned around belatedly, only to find George standing behind me, though I had no idea when he had arrived. The corners of his mouth drooped slightly, his eyes unreadable as he stared at me intently. Why? Before I could answer, George continued that I don't agree to a divorce. The words I blurted out in the heat of the moment were heard in their entirety by George. After 20 years of marriage, both of us are getting on in years, and for the first time, we've fallen into a cold war. Or rather, I'm the only one fighting it. I'm also annoyed. What's wrong? I didn't say anything wrong. Who is he giving that sour face to? Now, I won't naively cling to my virtuous and gentle image anymore. If George dares to provoke me, I'll slap him. 2. The system popped up to remind me. Host, the drama value has been reset to 0. You can go home at any time. I know the mission is complete and I can go back now, but perhaps due to a feeling of nervousness about returning home, I hesitated to summon the system. In this world, I haven't become someone else. Instead, I've experienced a completely new life just as I am here. I also have my family, my friends, and many others I find hard to part with. The time I've spent living here has even surpassed that in my original world. I'm unsure whether I should go back, and it's kept me up for several nights. Unfortunately, Frank has always been tactless. I was already furious, and he just added fuel to the fire. Mom, do you know that Oilia is going abroad? At that moment, I was having breakfast at the rectangular dining table. I usually sat next to George, but this time seeing him there, I snorted and asked the butler to bring my portion to the seat farthest from him. What does her going abroad have to do with you? Frank hesitated for a long time, lowering his eyes. I don't want her to leave. I sneered a few times. Frank has been tied up in lawsuits lately, and I specifically told George not to help him this time, and even had George withdraw the investment in his subsidiary. It seems Frank isn't troubled enough yet. He still has the energy to bother Oilia. Frank knows that Oilia and I are on good terms now. He came to the old house early in the morning to ask if I could help him win her back. I'm so angry I could laugh. Where do you get the nerve? Do you really think I'd help you? Mom, I really know I was wrong. I've already cleaned things up with Nicole. Please just help me this once. Frank choked up several times without Oilia. I really can't go on living. George felt a bit uneasy, looking as if he wanted to say something, but I shot him a sharp glare. If you can't go on living, then just die. Maybe she'll come to your funeral. I was in a bad mood and spoke harshly upon hearing my words. Frank widened his eyes slightly. Mom, am I still your son? I am your only child, the sole heir of the Green family. How could you treat me like this? I slammed the table and stood up with a loud thud. Frank instinctively took half a step back and covered his face. Who said, "You're my only child"? Frank's mouth opened slightly and he quickly glanced at George. You have an illegitimate child. George also stopped all movement, staring at me without blinking, taking Frank by surprise. I slapped him. Get out of here. You wretch. Is that how you think of your mother? Giving birth to you was worse than giving birth to a piece of churro. I'll just have to reincarnate with your dad and make another one someday." George's entire face stiffened and his chopsticks fell to the floor. I was very dissatisfied with his reaction. "You're not willing." Seeing George hesitate to speak, I raised my hand again. His lips trembled, and he bowed his head deeply. It will definitely be born. I really can't take it anymore." George was lying right next to me, tossing and turning restlessly, making it impossible for me to fall asleep. I threw a pillow at him. "If you're not going to sleep, get out." George took the pillow off. "Kathy, I want to talk to you about something about the child." I instinctively felt that he wanted to plead for Frank. "This matter is not up for discussion. It's really true that men are best at empathizing with other men. Don't you know how Frank treated Oilia? How dare you even think about getting them back together? Your son's life matters. But does Oilia owe your family anything?" After I lashed out at him, George fell silent for a moment. "It's not about Frank. It's about what you said this morning, that you still want to have another child." "That was just something I said off the top of my head. Just kidding. I'm almost menopausal. How could I possibly have a baby? If you really want one, we can adopt another. If you don't like Frank, we can just not acknowledge him as our son." George's words were full of resistance, and I snapped from your tone. "It sounds like you're disgusted. What do you think? I'm too old and unattractive to have a child with." "That's not what I meant." George said, "First of all, you've been through childbirth before, from pregnancy to delivery to postpartum recovery. Each stage is incredibly difficult. Besides, we're not young anymore. The risks of pregnancy are higher for older mothers. So, this stage of our lives just isn't the right time." George's nagging made me sleepy. I pulled the blanket over my head. All right. I know you're too old and can't do it anymore. Fine. George is 2 years older than me, although he's already in his 40s. He has always been very disciplined, often works out, and has maintained himself well to this day. I know very well whether he can or can't do it, but I just didn't want to listen to his nagging anymore. So, I deliberately said that to shut him up, but after an eerie silence, George actually didn't argue back. I poked my head out from under the quilt, and George looked at me quietly, lost in thought. Years have passed, and as I gaze at this face that has accompanied me through most of my life, time has been kind to him, leaving few traces on his face, occasionally giving me the illusion that I am the only one growing old. He raised his hand and gently touched my hair. "Yes, I really can't have children anymore, but if there's anything else you want, I'll make it up to you twice over. So, can you not divorce me because of this?" I was taken aback. "What do you mean? You can't have children?" George lowered his eyes. "I've had a vasectomy. Kathy, when I gave birth to Frank, I had a difficult delivery. The dozen or so hours I spent in the hospital were simply unbearable. But George, as my husband, never showed up even once. He wasn't even in H City at the time. He was still away on a business trip at that moment. I couldn't care less about acting and let out all the swear words. But mostly, I cried and sobbed, shouting that I hate you. George, you're so annoying. If I ever like you again, I won't be a Fong anymore." But when I woke up, I saw George sleeping by my hospital bed, dark circles under his eyes, frowning as he held my hand. I saw George awkwardly holding Frank with a confused expression that didn't suit him at all. When the elevator was under repair, George carefully carried me down the 13 flights of hospital stairs. His forehead beat with sweat, not saying a word. I shamefully fell in love with him again. I couldn't make it back. At that time, I was truly at my wits' end. As luck would have it, I encountered a once-in-a-century snowstorm. Flights were grounded, high-speed trains were suspended, and many sections of the highways were closed. According to George, he had to take multiple buses and trucks, and even hitched a ride on an ox cart for a short stretch before finally making it back to H City. But by the time he got back, I had already given birth. I was stunned. I had never heard George mention this, because the city he went to on a business trip was the city where his sister had settled after marriage. I always thought he wasn't there that day because he didn't want to come back. "That's your fault." 2. I complained to him. I clearly reminded you at that time that my due date was approaching. If you hadn't gone on a business trip, this wouldn't have happened, would it? George, at that time, I almost died. George pursed his lips that I know. So I swear I won't let that happen again. Having a child is too much of a burden for you. I don't want you to go through that kind of risk again. It seems as though the world operates by some kind of rule. Just like in the original story, Oilia faked her death to escape once, and Frank thought he had lost her completely. Only then did he learn to love her. Perhaps George is the same. He also felt that he was about to lose me, so it was probably from that day that he began to love me. I pouted, not feeling very happy about this realization, but there was also an indescribable sense of relief. Kathy, can we not get a divorce? I turned my back, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. It depends on my mood. Not necessarily. So George tossed and turned all night again, which was really annoying. Tomorrow, I'll definitely have the housekeeper tidy up the guest room and make him sleep there. Divorce. I'm not getting a divorce. This status is just perfect. George has to listen to me, and Frank has to listen to me, too. If I get divorced, how can I keep tormenting them? I haven't even settled the score with him for all he owes me. I sneered darkly. Yes, I can't divorce him and let him off easy. I will keep dragging him along like this until death do us part. Host, are you really decided not to go back? Just for now. I corrected it. Didn't you say I could call you any time I want? The system originally disagreed. It said it has business in other worlds and can't stay here all the time. I don't care about it. It was the one that inexplicably chose me, threw me into this world, and only showed up after so many years, leaving me with a complete mess. The current plot is already vastly different from the original book. Oilia went abroad to pursue her dreams. Frank fell from a domineering CEO to a destitute man, and Nicole was also imprisoned with no chance of turning things around. Oh, so even if the plot becomes more dramatic and cliched, it doesn't matter, no matter how much I dislike him. Frank is still the child I carried for 10 months and gave birth to. I see it clearly. His treacherous heart has never died. He's been secretly preparing to go abroad to find Alia. If I were to just walk away like this, with no one to restrain him, who knows what twists the already corrected plot might take? The system was at a loss for words and could only agree to grant me one permission to contact it whenever I wanted to leave. As for George, the best approach I could think of was to lay all my cards on the table with him. I told him that I was not originally from this world and that I could leave at any time with the system making an exception to appear and vouch for me. As a result, George was overwhelmed with a profound sense of unease. I thought it all through. What he fears most right now is losing me. If I were to return to my original world, it would certainly deal him a heavy blow, but that would be like a psychological victory. Besides, no matter how much he suffers, I wouldn't be able to see it. Rather than that, it's better for me to become unpredictable. He won't know when I might leave, forever trapped in the fear of possibly losing me at any moment. I noticed George always kept his eyes fixed on me, as if afraid he might lose track of me if he looked away for even a moment. I kept a straight face, but inside I was absolutely thrilled because Oilia had invited me to attend her graduation ceremony abroad. George and his father Frank followed me around like shadows the entire day. One asks, "Can I not go?" Another asks, "Can you take me with you?" I say that, no. George asks again, "Then when will you be back after you leave this time?" Frank also asks, "Mom, Oilia, is she coming back?" Once upon a time, the roles were reversed. Or perhaps Oilia once asked with such passion and sorrow, "When will you come back? Do you really have to go?" I chuckled softly and replied with the same words. "Can you stop clinging to me all the time? What you're doing will only make me more and more annoyed." After hearing the 2 stories above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.